Welcome to Heartbreak Chronicles. The yard echoed with laughter and the crisp sound of glasses clinking as friends and family gathered to celebrate our 20th wedding anniversary. Colored lights hanging above the garden give off a soft glow, adding a touch of magic to the evening. By all rights, I should have felt immensely happy, but an inexplicable sense of unease lingered. I stood at the bar, sipping my whiskey and sweeping my eyes over the crowd. My wife, Natalie, gracefully maneuvered through the guests with a warm smile on her face. She let out a chuckle at something her neighbors said, her hand resting lightly on the other woman's arm. She looks perfect and is any husband's dream partner. But something in her demeanor felt like it was deliberate, like she was wearing a mask. "Liam, come here, man." Jason's voice came from the other end of the garden. My best friend of 25 years was waving from the buffet table with a big smile on her face. A small group of guests surrounded him, listening to him with rapt attention. "Hold on, let me get another glass." I raised my empty glass in response. Jason gave a thumbs up and turned back to his audience. I turned to the bartender and signaled for another drink. While waiting, my eyes fell back on Natalie. She was standing with Jason now, her laughter coming faintly through the hum of conversation. The way she leaned toward him caught my attention, the way her hand lingered too long on his arm, the way her body language seemed too intimate. "Thanks," I whispered to the bartender, picking up the newly poured drink. I walked toward them, intending to join the conversation, but as I approached, their conversation froze me in place. "Can you believe he still thinks these kids are his even now?" Natalie's voice was low, but the mocking tone in it was clearly recognizable. She laughed softly, running her fingers lightly over Jason's sleeve. "He raised almost your entire family." Jason sneered and took a sip of his drink. "Plus all the money he's put into their private schools and trips. We couldn't have done better on our own." I froze, my heart beating violently in my chest, my brain desperately trying to comprehend what I was hearing. But the next sentence completely shattered any lingering doubts. "Yeah, Uncle Jason's a lot more fun than our loser dad." Amber's voice interjected. My oldest daughter showed up at Jason's side, and her casual taunts went deeper than any hurt I could have imagined. A fiery anger surged through me, intertwined with the nausea created by the sense of betrayal. I gripped the glass so hard that my knuckles ached. I forced myself to stand still, desperately trying to maintain my composure. "Hey Dad, are you okay?" Amber suddenly noticed me standing there, her tone light and teasing as if she hadn't just stabbed me in the chest. Natalie and Jason turned to look at me, and Natalie's smile disappeared, a flicker of what could have been guilt or fear in her eyes. Jason, the perpetual actor, raises his glass and flashes his signature confident smile. "Liam, we were just talking about how great this party was. You were brilliant, man," he said, his tone dripping with contrived hypocrisy. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring into the abyss. Emotions of anger, heartbreak, and humiliation vied for supremacy, but eventually, a cold sobriety overtook me. "This is not the time to break out. Not yet. I'm glad you guys are having fun," I said calmly, forcing out a smile. My voice sounded strange, cold and calm. I turned to Natalie. "Can we talk?" She hesitated, looking at Jason and then back at me. "Sure. Is everything okay? Let's go inside." I gestured toward the house and walked away without waiting for a response, knowing she would follow. Upon entering the living room, the noise of the party abated, leaving only the hum of the refrigerator and the faint hum of the garden lights. I turned to face her, my hands deep in my pockets to keep from shaking. "What's wrong, Liam? You're acting strange," Natalie said, with camouflaged concern in her voice. I took a deep breath, the conversation I had just overheard repeating over and over like a broken record in my head. "How long?" She blinked, looking caught off guard. "What are you talking about? How long has it been going on between you and Jason? Whatever the hell it is." My voice was calm, but every word was like a blade. Her face paled, and for a moment she looked genuinely frightened, then regained her composure and crossed her arms in a defensive stance. "I don't know what you think you heard, but don't." I interrupted her pointedly. "Don't lie to me, Natalie. I heard it all." She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. Silence spread between us, heavy and suffocating. "Is it true?" I pressed, my voice rising slightly. "Are the children not even mine?" Her shoulders slumped and she averted her gaze, unable to meet mine. "That's all the confirmation I need." I turned toward the stairs, my movements mechanical. "Liam, wait." Natalie shouted from behind me, her voice trembling. "Let's talk about this, please." I stopped at the bottom of the stairs and turned to face her. "There's nothing more to talk about," I said coldly. "The party's over. Tell everyone to leave." "You can't just dash," she began, but I interrupted her. "Do it now, Natalie." Immediately, without waiting for her response, I walked back to the center of the room, each step heavier than the last, but the anger burning inside kept my movements steady. I stopped at the buffet table, took a deep breath, and then cleared my throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," I called out, my voice cutting through the conversation. "Thank you for coming. Unfortunately, the party is over. Please leave." The room fell silent, gasps of surprise and whispers spreading through the crowd as the guests exchanged confused looks. Natalie froze in mid-laugh, her champagne glass stopping in midair. "Liam," she said, alarm and confusion in her voice. "What are you doing?" I ignored her question and took a step forward, my eyes searching the room until they locked on Jason. His confident smile faltered slightly when our eyes met. I pointed directly at him. "You," I said, my voice smooth but icy. "Get out of my house right now." Jason smiled awkwardly and scanned the area as if hoping someone would come to his rescue. "Hey man, what's going on?" "You know very well what's going on here." I growl lowly and take another step forward. The room seemed to shrink around us as the other guests faded into the background. "Don't make me repeat myself a second time." Natalie walks towards me, her expression shifting from confusion to panic. "Liam, stop. You're making a scene." "Haunting." I laughed harshly, turning to her. "You want to talk about making a scene, Natalie? How about you tell everyone in the room why I'm ending this party, or better yet, why I'm kicking your lover out of our house?" The room erupted into shocked whispers. Natalie went pale, and Jason's usual composure crumbled. He raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. "Liam, you're misunderstanding something," he said, his voice quivering. "Let's just talk and work this out." I take a step toward him, my fists clenched at my side. "Talk? You mean like you talked to my wife behind my back? Or do you mean like how you both laughed at me while you let me raise your kids?" Natalie huffed backwards. "Liam, please, not here. Let's find somewhere private to talk about this." I shake my head and let out a bitter laugh. "Privacy? Now you care about privacy?" "No, Natalie, you don't worry about privacy when you're screwing around behind my back. So why should I care?" Amber stepped forward, her face red with embarrassment and anger. "Dad, you're acting crazy, calm down." I turned to her, my chest tightening. "Amber, stay out of this. You don't understand the full story." Jason used the brief distraction to move toward the door. "Look, I'll just leave, okay? We'll talk later." "You're right, you're leaving." I interrupted, blocking his way. "But there won't be any talk later, Jason. End of story. Don't ever come near me or this house again." The room was silent, except for the sound of Jason's shoes scuffing the floor as he stepped back. He glanced over to Natalie, who stood at attention, tears in her eyes. He slipped out the door without a word, and I turned to the remaining guests. "I think you've all stayed too long," I said coldly, my eyes sweeping over the shocked faces. "Get out." There was a moment of hesitation, and then the crowd began to disperse, the sound of awkward footsteps filling the space. Some people whispered apologies or expressions of sympathy as they passed me, but I didn't respond. All my attention focused on Natalie, who remained where she stood, a mixture of anger and despair on her face. After the last guest left, I closed the door and turned to face her. The silence in the room was deafening. "What the fuck were you thinking, Liam?" she demanded, her voice quivering. "You humiliated me in front of everyone." "Humiliated you?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You slept with my best friend, Natalie, and how long did that betrayal last?" Months? Years." She averted her eyes and wrapped her arms around herself. "Things aren't what you think they are." She grunted. "Don't insult my intelligence." I snapped. "I heard it all. You and Jason laughing at me, making fun of me while I raised those kids while being kept in the dark. Are they mine or not, Natalie? Or has my whole life been a lie?" She didn't answer, tears running down her cheeks. Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. "You ruined everything," I said, my voice breaking from trying to keep my composure. "Our marriage, our family, our friendship. Was it worth it?" She shook her head, sobbing. "Liam, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, okay? Please, we can work this out. Let's talk about it." I stared at her, the woman I'd loved for 20 years, and felt nothing but disgust. "No, Natalie, there's nothing to fix. You and Jason made sure of that." She took a step closer and reached out to touch my arm. "Please, Liam, for the sake of the children, don't do this." I shrugged off her hand, my expression cold and hard. "Don't you dare drag them into this. You've already used them as pawns in that sick little game of yours. They'll learn the truth soon enough." Her sobs got louder, but I turned toward the stairs. "Where are you going?" she shouted. "Go pack your bags," I said, without looking back. "I'll contact a lawyer first thing in the morning." "We're done, Natalie. Don't even try to stop me." I climbed the stairs and left her sobbing in the living room. As I walked into the bedroom, It felt like everything was pressing down, but along with the pain came a hint of something else: determination. It's not the end, it's the beginning, a new chapter where I take back control of my life. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my desk with a notepad and pen, surrounded by shadows and silence, drafting divorce papers. Each stroke of the pen feels like cutting away a part of an old life. Every memory, every shared laugh, and every plan for the future reduced to cold legalese. By dawn, the paperwork was ready, and I called my attorney, Robert, as the sun rose. "Robert," I said when the call came through, "I need to meet with you today. It's urgent." "Liam," he replied, his voice sleepy but professional. "What happened?" "I'm going to file for divorce, and I need it to be finalized as soon as possible." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Okay," he finally said. "Be in my office at 9, and we'll start the process." I hung up the phone and walked to the bedroom. Natalie was still asleep, her face lingering from last night's crying. For a moment, I hesitated, the faint remnants of the love I once felt for her trying to surface, but then I remembered her words, her betrayal, and my resolve became stronger. I grabbed my briefcase and left without saying a word. The meeting with Robert was quick and calm. I handed over the papers and explained the situation in detail. His eyes widened as I recounted what I had overheard, but he kept it professional. "This is a strong case of infidelity," he said, flipping through the papers. "You will have grounds for a non-consensual divorce, and we can protect your assets. Have you considered custody or support arrangements?" I shook my head. "No custody. They're not my kids, Robert." He raised an eyebrow but didn't press the issue. "Understood. I'll arrange to file the paperwork today." When I got home, Natalie was waiting for me, her eyes bloodshot and a cup of coffee clutched in her hand as if it were a lifesaver. "Liam," she spoke, her voice trembling. "Can we talk?" "There's nothing to talk about," I said, walking past her. "It's over. You can't just walk away and throw away everything we've built," she pleaded, following me into the living room. "Don't you dare guilt me with them," I snapped, turning to face her. "I've given them everything, and this is how you repay me." She cringed, tears welling up again. "It was a mistake, Liam. I never meant for it to go this far. Please, can we try to fix this?" I laughed out loud, actually laughed out loud. "Fix this? You've been lying to me for years, Natalie. Every word, every promise, a lie. How are you going to fix those?" Footsteps interrupted us, and Amber and the boys stood at the bottom of the stairs, their faces pale. "Dad, what's going on?" Amber demanded to know. I sighed and ran a hand through my hair. "Ask your mom. She owes you all an explanation." "Why do you keep blaming Mom?" Amber retorted, her voice rising. "Last night she said you were acting crazy. Just talk to us." Natalie tried to interject. "Amber, honey, this is between your father and me, dash." "No, it's not," I said firmly. "They deserve to know the truth, Natalie." Natalie's face crinkles with fear, and I turn to the kids. "Your mom and Jason have been cheating on me for years, and you guys," my voice choked, but I forced myself to continue. "You're not my kids. Jason is your father." The room was silent except for Natalie's suppressed sobs. Amber's face was red with anger. "You're lying," she shouted. "I hope so," I said calmly, but I heard it from her own mouth. The boys looked at each other, confusion and fear etched on their faces. "Is this true, Mom?" one of them asked softly. Natalie broke down completely and fell to her knees. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I never wanted you guys to find out like this." Amber rushed up the stairs and slammed the door. The boys stayed for a moment and then followed her, leaving Natalie and I alone. Over the next few days, I began to implement my plan. Meet with a financial advisor to liquidate assets and transfer funds to a new account. Every joint asset we owned was either sold or transferred to my name. Natalie tried to resist, pleading with me at every turn. "Liam, you can't do this," she said one night as I packed the last of my personal belongings. "This is our home, and the kids need stability." I didn't even look at her. "They'll get stability with their real father." I'm tired of being the fool. By the end of the week, the house was almost empty. I left an envelope containing divorce papers and a short note on the kitchen counter. "Natalie, this is the life you chose. I'll take what's mine and leave the rest to you. Don't contact me, Liam." I walked out the door, leaving nothing behind but the silence and weight of a broken life. The early morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting dappled light in the living room. I stood in the center of the empty house and looked around. This space, once filled with laughter and memories, is now only a remnant of betrayal. I took a deep breath and looked at my watch, 9:30, just in time for my appointment with Robert. The law firm is located in a towering glass building in the center of town. Robert's office is decorated in a minimalist yet professional manner, with panoramic views of the city out the windows. He stood up to greet me, shaking hands with professional sympathy in his gaze. Liam, right on time. He gestured for me to sit down. Are all the materials ready? I removed a thick folder from my briefcase and pushed it in front of him. All the financial records, bank statements, real estate documents, and a draft of the divorce terms I prepared ahead of time. Robert raised an eyebrow and flipped through the papers. You made thorough preparations. I was up all night. I replied calmly. He nodded, understanding my situation. Divorce cases based on infidelity are usually more straightforward, especially in cases like this. He paused for a moment, phrasing his words carefully. About the children. Are you sure you want to give up all custody? I felt a stabbing pain in my chest, but my expression stayed the same. They're not my children, Robert. Not biologically. Now that I know the truth, it seems pointless to keep pretending. From a legal standpoint, you are still their legal father. A relationship that's been nurtured for over a decade doesn't disappear because of DNA. I averted my eyes and looked out the window. I need to cut this off. Cleanly. Robert sighed, but didn't argue further. I will file the papers immediately. Based on Natalie's infidelity, we can fight to divide the property in your favor. Are you sure you want to give up the house as well? Sell it. Split the proceeds. I don't want anything that reminds me of her or that marriage. Understood. He jotted down a few points on his notepad. What about joint accounts and investments? Most of it has already been dealt with. I need you to make sure the rest is frozen until the court rules. Over the next hour, we discussed in detail the legal process of divorce, asset distribution, and timelines. When we finished, a strange sense of calm enveloped me. It's like through these cold, hard legal actions, I'm taking back control of my life. Liam, Robert called out to me before I left. Do you have a place to stay? I booked the hotel. Start looking for an apartment tomorrow. He nodded. Good. Remember, from now on, all communication with Natalie should go through me or another legal representative. Protect yourself. When I arrived home, I found Natalie sitting at the dining room table, staring blankly at a cup of cold coffee. When she saw me walk in, she immediately stood up. Where have you been? She asked, her voice hoarse from crying the night before. See the lawyer. I replied briefly, walking straight upstairs to the master bedroom. She followed me, panicked. Counselor? Liam, you can't seriously consider a divorce. 20 years of marriage can't end like this. I opened my closet and started loading clothes into my suitcase. It's over, Natalie. You and Jason made sure of that. That was a mistake. Her voice raised. People make mistakes, Liam. We can go to counseling and fix the relationship. Fix, I snapped, turning to face her. You cheated on me with my best friend, tricked me into believing those kids were mine, and laughed at me behind my back. Tell me, Natalie, how the hell do I fix this betrayal? Tears welled up in her eyes again. I love you, Liam. No matter what happens, that's true. I sneered and continued packing. Love? Don't insult my intelligence. Love is not cheating, betrayal, or lies. Just as Natalie was about to say something else, there was the sound of a door opening downstairs, followed by footsteps and soft conversation. The kids are back. The atmosphere between us changed immediately, a tense silence replacing the heated conversation. They need to know the truth, I said, closing my suitcase. Natalie shook her head in horror. No, Liam, please. Let me find the right time and way to tell them. With lies and delays like you've handled everything else in this marriage? No. Today they will know the truth. I grabbed my suitcase and walked down the stairs. Amber, Noah, and Tyler were in the kitchen when they saw the two of us coming down, their expressions immediately alert. What's going on? Amber asked, eyeing the suitcase in my hand warily. Where are you going, Dad? That epithet stung like a needle, but I kept my composure. Sit down, we need to talk. The children exchanged uneasy looks, but took their seats at the table. Natalie stood by, her fingers clutching the hem of her shirt, fear written all over her face. I owe you all an explanation for last night. I began, my voice more steady than I expected. You're acting like a crazy person. Amber immediately interjected, humiliating Mom and Uncle Jason in front of everyone. I heard the three of you talking at the party. I looked her straight in the eye. The conversation about me not being your real father. The air in the room seemed to freeze. Noah and Tyler's eyes widened in disbelief. That's not true. Amber's voice trembled. You're misunderstanding something. Enough, Amber. Natalie snapped, her voice tired and lost. They deserve to know the truth. All eyes turned to her as she slowly walked over to the table and sat down. It's true, she said, tears rolling down her cheeks. Liam is not your real father. Jason is. Noah lets out a low sob and Tyler freezes completely, as if struck by lightning. Amber's face turned from white to red, anger burning in her eyes. How long has it been? She asked, her voice dangerously low. Natalie looked at me helplessly, but I offered no support. It's her lie, her responsibility. Almost from the beginning. She eventually admitted, Jason and I had a relationship before Liam and I were married. When I found out I was pregnant, her voice faded. So my whole life has been a lie? Amber stood up so violently that her chair fell to the floor with a loud thud. You and Jason have been lying to us? And you? She turned to me with a mixture of anger and confusion in her eyes. You were part of that lie? No, I said firmly. I didn't know the truth until last night. I always thought you were my children. Noah looked up, his eyes red and swollen. So what now? Are you going to leave us? That question was like a knife to my heart. Even though rationally I knew they weren't my blood relatives, 16 years of fatherly love wouldn't disappear overnight. However, every time I see them, it reminds me of Natalie and Jason's betrayal. I need some time and space. I finally replied. I've already contacted a lawyer and started the divorce process. The property side of things will be decided by the court. What about us? Tyler finally spoke, his voice so small it was barely audible. Are we nothing to you anymore? I can't look him in the eye. It's complicated, Tyler. I need time to think. You're just abandoning us. Amber snapped. Just because we're not your biological children, you can pretend the last 16 years don't exist? Amber, stop, Natalie. It's not Liam's fault. It was Jason and I who betrayed him and lied to everyone. If you want to hate someone, hate us, not him. The atmosphere became heavy and suffocating. I grabbed my suitcase and headed for the door. I'll be in touch. I said, not sure it was a lie. Give me some time. Walking out that door was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. As the car started, I looked through the rearview mirror and saw the 3 children standing on the porch, their silhouettes dwindling until they disappeared. The next few days were like a carefully choreographed dance. I moved into a downtown hotel and started looking for a permanent home. During the day, I met with bankers, realtors, and financial advisors to systematically separate my life from Natalie's. At night, I sit alone in my hotel room, staring at pictures of my children on my phone screen, thinking about how I should define my relationship with them. On the 3rd day, I got a call from Jason. I stared at the name blinking on the screen, considering whether or not to answer. Eventually, I pressed the answer button, but didn't speak. Liam, his voice came from the other end, sounding exhausted. We need to talk. We have nothing to talk about. I replied coldly. 25 years of friendship ends like this. He sounded almost pleading. At least give me the chance to explain. Explain what? Explain how you betrayed my trust? Explain how you cheated on me with my wife and made me raise your children? Or explain how you two laughed at me behind my back? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I'm sorry, Liam. We didn't want it to come to this. But you did it anyway. My voice was calm and steady. Now you have to face the consequences. I've filed the divorce papers and the property settlement is underway. If you want to play the role of father, now's your chance. Those kids need you, Liam. I felt a surge of anger come over me. How dare you tell me they need me? Where were you, Jason, for almost 20 years when I was paying their tuition, attending their soccer games, and staying up late to take care of them when they were sick? You were just a weekend uncle, and I was the one who actually raised them. I know. His voice grew weak. I fucked up, okay? But now, Dash. It's too late now. I interrupted him. Don't contact me again. If there are any legal matters, contact them through my attorney. I hung up and felt a strange sense of relief. The anger towards Jason is still there, but it no longer occupies my entire thoughts. Instead, I began to focus on the future. It wasn't just my life I needed to rebuild. It was my identity. No longer a husband. No longer, at least biologically, a father, just Liam. On the 5th day, I found an apartment on the other side of town. It's small and simple and nothing like us. Nothing like the big house Natalie and I have. But it's clean, it's bright, and most importantly, it's free of memories. That same day, I received a call from Robert. The court has accepted your petition for divorce, he told me. And based on the evidence of infidelity, the process should go relatively smoothly. Regarding property division, we may need to negotiate, and Natalie has hired her own attorney. She can keep what she wants, I replied. I just want to end this. Liam, Robert's tone became more professional. I understand your feelings, but you shouldn't give up what you're entitled to. 20 years of marriage and you've invested a lot of time and resources. I rubbed my temples, feeling a wave of exhaustion. Okay, do as you suggest. Just make sure the process is as quick as possible. After hanging up, I decided to check out the new apartment. As I walked into that empty space, I felt a strange sense of calm. No furniture, no decorations, just possibilities. I can make it look any way I want. Just then, my cell phone rang again. It's Amber. I take a deep breath and pick up the phone. Dad. Her voice sounded small, not like her usual confident self. "Hi, Amber," I replied, unsure of what to say. "Are you coming back?" she asked directly. I leaned against the wall of my empty apartment and closed my eyes. "No, Amber, I'm not going back." A sob came from the other end of the line. "Why? Is it because we're not your biological children?" "It's not just that." I tried to keep my voice steady. "Your mom and Jason betrayed my trust. I can't pretend that didn't happen. But you can pretend we don't exist?" Her voice trembled with anger. "For 16 years you've been telling us you love us, and now you're just going to walk away?" Her words stabbed me like a knife. "I do love you all, Amber. That won't change. But I need time. I need space." "Liar," she whispered and hung up. I stood there, cell phone still pressed to my ear, and felt a sharp pang of pain. But with it came a strange determination. That's what had to happen. Clean cut. Fresh start. On the 7th day, I returned to the house with the intention of retrieving some last personal items. I purposely picked a time when Natalie was at work, hoping to avoid another painful confrontation. But when I walked in, I found her sitting in the living room, apparently waiting for me. "I took a vacation," she explained, seeing my surprised expression, "and wanted to make sure I was home when you got here." I nodded and headed straight upstairs to start collecting my books, papers, and a few items of sentimental value. Natalie followed me, keeping her distance, but never out of sight. "The children miss you," she finally spoke, "especially the boys." I didn't respond and continued to fill the box. "I told them you needed time," she continued. "I told them it wasn't their fault." I stopped what I was doing and turned to her. "Thanks," I said briefly. "Liam," she took a step closer, "I know I screwed up and hurt you. But please don't punish the kids for my mistakes. Regardless of biology, you're the only father they've known in 16 years." I felt a stabbing pain in my chest, but my expression stayed the same. "I need time, Natalie." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I understand. Just don't disappear completely, okay?" I grabbed my filled suitcase and headed downstairs. At the door, I stopped to take one last look around the place that used to be my home. The family photos on the walls, the kids' sports trophies, the furniture we chose together, all of it is physical evidence of what I once thought was my life. Now they look like memories that belong to someone else. "Bye, Natalie," I said, walking out the door without looking back. A strange sense of relief enveloped me as I put the last of the boxes in the car. It's as if I finally let go of a burden I've been carrying for so long. A new apartment awaits me, along with new possibilities. No lies, no betrayal, just a fresh start. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove away from the place that used to be my home without looking back. 5 years later, the early morning sunlight poured into the room through the cracks in the curtains, and I opened my eyes, taking a moment to let my thoughts focus. The gentle sound of the tides coming through the window reminds me that this is not the city, but the new life I've chosen. I sat up and looked at the time on my nightstand, 6:30, just in time for sunrise. I put on my running gear, gently closed the door to the beach house, and jogged along the beach. When I sailed away from the house that was no longer my home 5 years ago, I never imagined that I would settle down in such a peaceful seaside town, much less find such a peaceful way of life. After my run, I went back to the cabin, took a shower, and then stood in the kitchen preparing breakfast. The aroma of coffee filled the air while my thoughts drifted back in time. Today is a special date, Natalie and I's 25th wedding anniversary, or it should have been. My cell phone vibrated, interrupting my thoughts. It was an email from my attorney, Robert. "Liam, we need to talk about Amber's college tuition. Natalie made a request. Please call me back if it's convenient." I sighed and put my phone down. Even though it's been 5 years, and even though the divorce is final, that past still permeates my present in various ways. Instead of replying immediately, I decided to put that aside for now and focus on the day. My cafe and bookstore, Shoreline, is located in the center of town, just a 10-minute walk away. This is the centerpiece of my new life, a safe haven created by my own hands. The bell rang softly as I pushed the door open, and the familiar scent of books and coffee greeted me. "Good morning, Liam." "Karen," my store clerk greeted with a smile as she was sorting through the new arrivals. "How are you feeling today?" "As always," I replied briefly, heading backstage to start preparing today's specialty coffee. At noon, as the small store filled with customers enjoying lunch, my cell phone vibrated again. This time it was a text message from a number I hadn't contacted in a long time. "Natalie." "Liam, I know what today means to us. I just want to say that I'm sorry. For everything. I hope you're doing well." I stared at the screen and felt a wave of mixed emotions rush over me. The anger had long since subsided, and all that remained was a faint sense of frustration. I didn't reply, just shoved my phone back in my pocket and went back to work. Later in the afternoon, When the store became quiet, Karen came up to me. "Someone's here to see you," she whispered, nodding toward the door. I looked up, surprised to find Tyler standing there, looking around uncertainly. He was no longer the skinny boy I had left, but had now grown into a tall young man with Jason's profile vaguely visible between his eyebrows. "Tyler," I said, my voice calmer than I expected. "It's been a while." "Hi, Liam," he responded, carefully avoiding calling me Dad, a tiny detail that stung. "Can I talk to you?" I guided him to the small office in the back of the store, closed the door, and gestured for him to sit down. "How did you find me?" "Not difficult." He shrugged. "Your cafe was recommended in the guidebook." I mean, me and know whether he'd been following you." I nodded, not knowing what to say. For 5 years, I've had intermittent contact with my children. For the first few months, I tried to stay in touch, but every call was filled with awkwardness and unspoken accusations. Over time, the connection diminishes until it almost completely disappears. "Is your mom okay?" I finally asked. Tyler's expression became complicated. "She's struggling. Things have gotten tough, especially lately." "What happened?" He took a deep breath and seemed to be weighing his words. "Jason had a heart attack. The medical bills are high and insurance only covers part of it. Mom had to take 2 jobs to pay the bills." I felt an unexpected twinge of sympathy, but it was quickly squashed. "I'm sorry to hear that, but I don't understand why you're telling me this. I'm not here for money, if that's what you're worried about," Tyler said quickly. "I just want you to know what's going on. Mom didn't want to bother you, but things got really bad." I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the ocean view. "How are you and Noah doing? How's school?" "I'm a sophomore at State. Noah's getting ready to apply to college next year, and Amber has graduated and is working at a marketing firm." He paused, "But finances are tight. Jason's job is unstable and Mom's paycheck is barely enough to cover bills and rent." "Rent?" I turned and looked at him confused. "Don't you guys live in that house?" Tyler shook his head. "We had to sell it about 3 years ago. There was too much debt, especially after Jason's medical bills started piling up. Now we live in a 2-bedroom apartment." I felt a moment of unexpected loss. That house holds so many memories, and even though many of them have been blackened by betrayal, it still gives me a twinge of sadness to think that it is no longer part of my family. "You guys live with Jason?" I asked, trying to make sense of the situation. "Yes, but it's complicated." Tyler sighed. "He and Mom are always fighting. About money, about the past, about everything. Sometimes I think they hate each other even more than." He didn't finish, but I understood what he meant. I returned to my seat, feeling a strange emotion, not gloating, but a calm cognizance of understanding how quickly life can change. "Why are you telling me this now, Tyler?" He looked me straight in the eye, and that direct gaze reminded me of him as a child. "Because no matter what happens, you were once our father. For 16 years, you were the one who was really there. Jason may have been my biological father, but he was never my dad." His words were like a knife to my heart. For 5 years, I tried to convince myself that cutting off contact with those kids was necessary, a painful but clean solution. And now, confronting Tyler, I realized that things were far more complicated than I had allowed myself to believe. "Does your mother know you're here?" I asked. He shook his head. "No, she's too proud to ask for help, especially from you." But I saw how she struggled, how she tried to hold everything together. I stood up and walked to the window again. Outside, the waves lapped gently against the shore, a timeless rhythm that reminded that change is always the only constant in life. "I'll think about it," I said finally, "but I can't promise anything." Tyler nodded, visibly relieved, as if he just needed to say the words and didn't necessarily need an immediate answer. "Thank you for hearing me out. I should get back. I won't make the last bus." I walked him to the door, and before he left, an impulse prompted me to say, "Keep in touch, okay?" He smiled and nodded, that smile giving me a glimpse of the little boy I once was. "Will do." As I watched him walk away, I felt a wave of emotion that I hadn't felt in a long time. For 5 years, I've been telling myself that I've let go of the past and have moved on from that betrayal. But Tyler's visit proves that there are some connections, no matter how hurtful, that can never be completely severed. That night, I sat on the porch of my beach house, a glass of whiskey in my hand, and my thoughts were racing. The cell phone screen showed an unread email. It was from Natalie. I got it a couple hours ago, but I've been afraid to open it. Eventually, I clicked on it. "Liam, I know it's been a long time, and I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I had to try. Things have gotten difficult. Jason's health issues, financial pressures, and everything is spiraling out of control. I'm not asking for monetary help, although honestly, we do need it, but I want you to know that the kids miss you. Regardless of the biological facts, You are the one who raised them and is their father in their hearts. I regret every day what we did and the hurt we caused you. If I could do it all over again, I would make different choices. But I can't change the past. I can only try to fix the present. Even just occasional contact with your children can mean the world to them, if you let it. Natalie. I closed the email, set my phone aside, and stared at the distant waves. 5 years ago, when I left that house and vowed to start a new life, I thought I could cut off my past for good. But reality proves that the bonds of life don't break that easily. The next morning, an unexpected visitor showed up at my cafe. Jason stood there, even more gaunt than I remembered him, his hair already gray and the wrinkles on his face deeper than his actual age indicated. Liam. He spoke, his voice huskier than I remembered. Can I talk to you? I looked around at the customers, then nodded and gestured for him to follow me to the back of the store. As soon as he walked into the office, he slumped into his chair, as if taking those few steps had taken all of his strength. You look terrible, I said calmly, without sympathy, but without malice either. He gave a bitter laugh. Heart disease will do that to you. The doctor says I need surgery, but we can't afford it. Insurance only covers part of the cost. So you're here for the money? I asked bluntly. No. He shook his head. I came to apologize. Not just for what happened in the past, but for what is happening now. I raised my eyebrows and waited for him to continue. I screwed up, Liam. Not only what started with Natalie 25 years ago, but everything since. I thought we could have the perfect life, but it turns out that relationships built on lies and betrayal eventually crumble. It wasn't a shocking discovery, Jason. He nodded, accepting my taunt. I know, but I want you to know that I pay for it every day. I've lost my best friend, my health is deteriorating, and my relationship with my children. He paused. They never really accepted me as their father. In their eyes, that was always your place. I felt a mixture of emotions flooding through me. Anger, sadness, and a hint of unnameable relief. Why are you telling me this? Because you should know that you won, Liam. Not in a vindictive way, but because you did the right thing. You loved those kids, raised them, and even after knowing the truth, you still cared about them. And he shook his head. I'm just a figure who exists on the fringes, someone who provided DNA, but never provided true fatherhood. I stood up and walked over to the window, my back to him. What about Natalie? Our relationship? It's complicated. He sighed. We're stuck together for financial reasons, out of habit, but the love is long gone. All we're left with is blaming each other and a sense of failure. What do you expect me to feel about this? Sympathy? Schadenfreude? No. His voice became calmer. I just want you to know that you made the right decision. To leave, to rebuild your life. The rest of us are trapped in the mistakes of the past, and you found a way forward. I turned to face him and was surprised to find tears in his eyes. This once confident, almost arrogant man is now crushed by the realities of life. I should go, he said as he stood up, his movements slow and difficult. Thank you for listening to me. As he walked to the door, I called out to him, Jason. He turned and looked at me with a questioning expression. About the cost of the surgery. I hesitated, struggling internally. Email me the details. I'll see what I can do. There was a flash of surprise in his eyes, then deep gratitude. Thanks, Liam. But that's not what I came for. I know. That's not why I offered to help either. He nodded, understanding what I meant, and left in silence. That evening, I sat on the porch of my beach house and reviewed the events of the past few days. Tyler and Jason's visit shatters my carefully constructed surface of calm, forcing me to confront emotions and connections that I've been trying to ignore. I picked up my cell phone and dialed a number I hadn't talked to in a long time. Dad. Amber's voice came from the other end of the line, full of surprise. Hey, Amber, I said, my voice calmer than I expected. I think it's time we talked. There was silence on the other end of the line for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice laced with 5 years of suppressed emotion. Yes, we should talk. We talked for a long time, about the past, about the present, about the unspoken words and the unhealed wounds. When we finally ended the call, I felt a long overdue peace, not from running away from the pain, but from facing it, accepting it, and moving on. The next morning, I woke up with a decision. I can't change the past, and I can't fully heal those broken relationships. But I can choose how I face the present and how I define my relationship with those who were once part of my life. I turned on my computer and sent Natalie an email. Natalie, I got your email and met with Tyler and Jason. I understand how difficult the situation is. Regarding Jason's medical expenses, I will help. Not for him, but for the kids. Regardless of the biological facts, in my heart, they are still the children I have loved and raised for 16 years. As for our relationship, that's over. But that doesn't mean I have to disappear from my children's lives. I'm willing to reconnect if they want me to. It's not about forgiving or forgetting, Natalie. It's just about choosing not to let the pain of the past define the future. Liam, after sending the email, I felt a strange sense of relief. For 5 years, I've been trying to heal myself by severing all ties to my past. But now I realize that true healing comes not from avoidance, but from confrontation, from the ability to understand that even the deepest wounds change over time. I stood on the beach and watched as the waves washed over the sand and then retreated back into the sea. The tide rises and falls and never stops, just like life itself. The past cannot be changed, but the future is still in my hands. And today, I'm choosing to stop being defined by resentment and bitterness and instead look forward to new possibilities. The next morning, I jogged along the beach, letting the cold water lick my ankles. After sending that email, I felt a strange calmness, as if a boulder that had been weighing on my chest for so long had finally been removed. Sometimes healing doesn't come from a complete cutoff, but from redefining relationships that have hurt you. Back at the cabin, I took a shower and got ready to head to the cafe. Karen was already preparing to open the store when she pushed open the door. "Good morning, boss." She smiled, handing me a cup of freshly brewed coffee. "Will that visitor from yesterday be back?" "Which one?" I asked, even though I knew who she was referring to. Karen shrugged. "It's that young man who looks like you." I stopped what I was doing and looked up at her. "He looks like me?" "Of course," she said, as if it were an obvious fact. "Same eyes, same stance." "I thought it was your son." I didn't correct her, just nodded and continued working. "Tyler does have some of my demeanor, which is the result of 16 years of living together. Regardless of what DNA testing shows, there are some connections that cannot be explained through science." An unexpected visitor walked into the store around noon. I was in the middle of organizing a new book when I heard the bell ring and turned around to find an unfamiliar woman standing in the doorway, looking around hesitantly. She was around her early 30s, dressed in a simple but elegant summer dress and holding a notebook. "Welcome to Shoreline," I said, putting down the book I was holding. "Can I help you?" She walked towards me, smiled, and held out her hand. "You must be Mr. Liam. I'm Rachel, a columnist for Coastal Living magazine. I'd like to ask you for a short interview about how your cafe bookstore has become a local cultural landmark." We found a quiet corner to sit in, and Rachel took the recording device and some prepared questions from her laptop. At first, I was wary of this interview, having gotten used to keeping my private life private over the years. But as the conversation progressed, I found myself beginning to relax. "What prompted you to come to this town 5 years ago to start a new life?" she asked, genuine curiosity shining in her eyes. I hesitated, weighing how to answer the question that touched on my past. "Sometimes life gives you a chance to start over," I eventually replied, "and the smart thing to do is to take it." She nodded and seemed to understand what I was saying. "So why did you choose to open a cafe bookstore?" "Books healed me," I replied, surprised at my own candor. During the darkest periods of my life, I found myself immersed in stories. This place is my tribute to that redemption. The interview lasted nearly an hour, with topics ranging from business strategy to my love of literature. When it was over, Rachel turned off the recording device and closed her laptop. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Liam. However, if you don't mind, I have one more off-the-record question." "Go ahead. You seem to be a remarkable man, with a stable career and obvious intelligence. Yet, you choose to live alone in this remote town. What keeps you away from more complicated relationships?" The blunt question caught me off guard. For years, I avoided thinking about it, even internally. "The scars of the past," I finally admitted. "Take time to heal." She nodded slightly, her expression softening. "So, do you think the wound has healed?" Our eyes met, and in that moment, I felt a long-lost connection. "I think so," I said, "or at least it's healing." After Rachel left, I found myself thinking about our conversation frequently. Her question struck a chord somewhere deep inside me and made me start to question whether this protective wall I had built was still necessary. 2 days later, Rachel reappeared at my store, this time without an interview device and just as a regular customer. We talked for a long time, with topics stretching from literature to philosophy to personal experiences. She's a wonderful listener, and sometimes all it takes is a simple question to get me to share thoughts that I usually keep to myself. "Are you free tomorrow?" she asked on her way out. "There's a place I'd like to show you." Early the next morning, Rachel drove me to a cliff on the outskirts of town. Standing there, overlooking the ocean, the view is endless. "I come here every time I need to think," she says, catching the ocean breeze. "And it reminds me how vast life is and how small our problems are." We stayed on the cliffs all morning, sometimes talking, sometimes just standing quietly together, taking in the beauty in front of us. I felt a comfort around Rachel that I had never felt before, as if there was no need for defenses or pretense between us. As the days went by, Rachel became an increasingly important presence in my life. We started meeting regularly to share our respective stories and reflections. One night, on the porch of the beach house, I finally told her the full story about Natalie, Jason, and the kids. "That must have been very painful," she whispered, her hand gently over mine. "To be betrayed by those closest to you." "Yes," I admitted. But surprisingly, looking back now, I feel more sadness than anger. Sadness because of those lost years, those relationships based on lies. "Do you regret leaving?" I pondered this for a while. It was an issue I had never allowed myself to really face in the past. "No," I finally replied. "I don't regret leaving. But what I do regret is completely cutting off contact with my children. Regardless of the biological facts, I played a fatherly role in their lives for 16 years. Leaving was necessary, but disappearing completely might have been a mistake." Rachel was silent for a moment, then asked, "So, what are you ready to do now?" "I'm not sure," I answered honestly. "But I know I no longer want to be defined by the past. I want to move forward." She smiled and nodded. "That's a good start." Our relationship deepened, shifting from friendship to a more intimate connection. Instead of rushing to label the relationship, Rachel lets it develop naturally. She gave me the space and time to move at my own pace, which was exactly what I needed. A month later, I received an email from Noah. He told me that he had received acceptance letters from several universities, but his family could not afford to pay the tuition fees. He didn't ask for help directly, but the implication was clear. I turned to Rachel for advice, and she encouraged me to follow my inner guidance. "I don't want them to think I'm going to go back to playing savior," I confessed. "But at the same time, I don't want to watch them struggle, especially if I'm in a position to help." "Maybe the key is to set boundaries," Rachel suggests, "where you can offer to help, but at the same time make it clear that it doesn't mean you're going back to your past role." I emailed Noah back and offered to pay for his college tuition with the proviso that he maintained excellent grades and report back to me each semester on his progress. I also made it clear that the grant was based on my belief in his personal potential and not out of a sense of responsibility for past relationships. Noah's response was filled with gratitude and a promise to cherish the opportunity. Enclosed is a family photo taken a few months ago. In the photo, Natalie looks even more emaciated than I remember, and Jason is in a wheelchair, apparently in further deteriorating health. Amber, Tyler, and Noah stood behind them with forced smiles on their faces. I feel a mixture of emotions looking at this photo. The family that was once the centerpiece of my life now seems so strange and so familiar. The years are etched on their respective faces, especially Natalie, whose wrinkles at the corners of her eyes and gray hair speak of the hardships of the past 5 years. "They look like they're having a hard time," Rachel said softly, standing beside me and looking at the picture. "Yes," I nodded. "The irony of fate, isn't it? They betrayed me to be together, and now they're suffering in that relationship." "Do you feel the thrill of revenge?" she asked, no judgment in her tone, only genuine curiosity. I thought deeply for a moment. At first it might have been, but now, no longer. Seeing their suffering doesn't make me happy. It just reminds me how impermanent life is and how our choices shape our destiny. Rachel took my hand and gave me a warm smile. "It shows that you've truly begun to heal, Liam. The desire for vengeance is a sign of pain, and compassion is a sign of strength." Over the next few months, I began to reconnect with my kids, albeit in a different way than I had in the past. Our relationship became more equal, more like a friendship between adults than a father-son relationship. Tyler started working at my cafe over the summer, and Amber would occasionally send in her photography for me to critique. Meanwhile, my relationship with Rachel was steadily growing. She brought me not only love and companionship, but a new perspective, a way of looking at life, not through the lens of pain, but through the prism of hope. We were sitting on the porch of our beach house one night, looking up at the star-filled sky. "You know," Rachel said suddenly, "you never told me exactly how you found out about Natalie and Jason's betrayal." I take a deep breath and remember the night that changed my life. It was at our 20th wedding anniversary party. I happened to overhear a conversation between Natalie and Jason. They were laughing at me, talking about how I didn't realize the kids weren't mine. "That must have been painful," she whispered. Yes, at that moment, I felt like the whole world was falling apart. But in retrospect, that was also the moment I really started to live. Rachel leaned over my shoulder. "Sometimes it takes a complete breakdown to rebuild something better." I nodded, realizing how right she was. That disastrous discovery destroyed everything for me, but it also gave me the freedom to start over. The next day, I got a call from Natalie. She rarely contacts me directly, usually passing on information through the kids or email. Liam. Her voice sounded more tired than usual. Jason passed away last night in his sleep. I sat down and digested the news. Even though my relationship with Jason had long been broken, it was still a shock to hear of his death. I'm sorry to hear that, I said sincerely. Thank you. Her voice choked. The children. They want you to come to the funeral. If you'd like. I hesitated, unsure if I was ready to face that occasion where all the history and emotions collided. I'll think about it, I finally replied. Thanks for letting me know. After hanging up, I found Rachel and told her the news. She held my hand and gave me comfort and space to process the complexity of this emotion. Do you want to go? She asked. I don't know, I replied honestly. On the one hand, it seems like an inappropriate occasion for me to show up. On the other hand, for the sake of the kids, maybe I should go. I'll support you in whatever you decide, she said gently. But remember that sometimes closing the loop takes one last rite of passage to truly complete. After much thought, I decided to attend the funeral, not for Jason, but for the children who still have a place in my life. Rachel offered to accompany me, an offer for which I was incredibly grateful. We drove back together to the city I'd been away from for 5 years. As familiar streets and landmarks come into view, memories of the past come flooding back, but to my surprise they no longer carry a sharp pain, but are more like vague echoes of a chapter that has ended. The funeral was simple and solemn. Rachel and I sat in the back row, keeping our distance. Natalie stood in the front row with her 3 children surrounding her. She looks haggard but strong, bearing the grief of losing her partner and the responsibility of arranging everything. After the ceremony, Natalie approached me with mixed emotions in her eyes. Thank you for coming, she whispered. It means a lot to the kids. I nodded and introduced Rachel. Natalie smiles politely, but I can see a flicker of sadness in her eyes, perhaps regret for her choices, or maybe just a lament for time lost. The children took turns coming over to talk to me, each expressing their appreciation for my attendance at the funeral. Amber, now a confident young woman, approached me last. Thank you, she said, her voice softer than usual. I know this isn't easy for you. I'm here for you guys, I replied, looking sincerely into her eyes. No matter what happens, you were and still are an important part of my life. She nodded, tears in her eyes, and then did something that surprised me. She hugged me for the first time in 5 years. We miss you, she whispered in my ear. Not just the financial support, but your presence. No one can take your place in our lives, not even Jason. I hugged her back tightly and felt a deep emotion come over me, a fatherly love that I thought had been permanently snuffed out by anger and betrayal. That visit became a turning point. Back in town, my connections with the kids became more frequent and deeper. We started regular video calls and arranged for them to come to town for vacations. Rachel has embraced them wholeheartedly, creating a warm environment where they feel welcome. 6 months later, on a quiet weekend, Rachel and I were sitting on the porch of our beach house, enjoying the sunset. You know, she whispered, you're the bravest person I've ever met. I turned to her, surprised at the sudden compliment. Brave? Yes, she nodded. To face a betrayal like that, to rebuild your life, and then to find the strength to forgive. It takes extraordinary courage. I pondered her words and realized that I had indeed come a long way. From the angry man who was determined to sever all ties to his past, to the man who is now able to redefine those relationships and find a balance where the pain of the past and the happiness of the present coexist. I'm in good hands, I said, taking her hand. She smiled and leaned into me as we watched the sun slowly sink into sea level. In that moment, I felt a deep peace, not just because of the happiness I now feel, but because I finally understood that sometimes the deepest wounds can be transformed into the greatest strength if we allow ourselves to heal, to grow, to love, even if it means risking getting hurt again. The next morning, I woke up feeling Rachel's steady breathing beside me. Sunlight poured in through the gaps in the curtains, adding a warm glow to the room. I rose gently and walked out onto the deck in front of the cottage, where the ocean breeze greeted me with a salty scent. In the stillness of the morning, an idea came to my mind. An idea that had been brewing for months. Maybe it was the conversation with Rachel last night, or maybe it was the experience of attending Jason's funeral that made the idea clearer. I need to document this journey in some way, not only for myself, but for those who may be going through similar pain. I went back to my study, opened my laptop, and created a new document. In the title bar, I hesitated for a moment, then typed, Broken Visions, a journey of betrayal and rebirth. For the next few weeks, I spent a few hours writing every morning, pouring my experiences, feelings, and thoughts into words. The process is sometimes painful, sometimes healing, but always real. I didn't glorify my anger or downplay my mistakes. I wrote about the discovery of betrayal, the pain of divorce, the complex changes in my relationship with my children, and the peace I eventually found with Rachel's help. Rachel became my first reader, patiently reading each chapter, providing feedback and support. One night, as she read the last chapter, she looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "It's beautiful, Liam. Painful, but beautiful. You should publish it." I shook my head. "It's just for me, a way to sort out my past." "No," she said firmly. "Your story can help a lot of people. Those who have been betrayed, those who are trying to rebuild their lives. Your journey, from pain to recovery to transcendence, it's a story that needs to be shared." With her encouragement, I contacted several publishers. To my surprise, a third publisher showed strong interest. Kevin, the editor, was enthusiastic on the phone, calling my manuscript one of the most honest and powerful personal narratives he had read in years. "People need a story like this, Liam," he said. "A true story about how to survive betrayal and find new meaning." 2 months later, the publishing contract was signed and editing began. I decided to use my real name and events, even though the publisher offered the option to use a pseudonym. This is my journey, my truth, and I don't want to hide behind the veil of anonymity. When I told the kids the news, they had mixed reactions. Amber initially expressed concern that the book would bring unwanted attention to them. Noah is neutral, while Tyler is supportive and thinks the story should be told. "But what if people recognize us?" Amber asked during a video call. "This book is not about exposure or revenge, Amber," I explained. "It's about recovering from betrayal, about finding the strength to move forward. Yes, it contains truth, but it also contains forgiveness and understanding." Natalie was the last to learn the news. I called her personally and thought she should hear this from me, not from anyone else. "I understand your need to express it," she said, her voice calm, but with a palpable tension. "But please consider the effect this will have on the children, on all of us." "I've talked to the kids," I replied, "and I won't hide what happened, but I won't malign anyone either." The point of this story is not the betrayal itself, but the journey that followed. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "You realize this will open up old wounds, don't you? Sometimes scars need to be uncovered in order to truly heal," I whispered. "Not just for me, but maybe for you too." Shattered Visions was published in the spring to a stronger than expected response. Critics praised its honesty and depth, and readers were struck by my journey from pain to recovery. Surprisingly, the book's chapter on rebuilding oneself after betrayal resonated the most, with many readers sharing their own stories of dealing with betrayal. Media attention followed. Local radio stations invited me for interviews, several magazines published book reviews, and even a national morning show expressed interest in having me as a guest. Suddenly, my private story became a public topic. This exposure has also had unintended consequences. One day, I received an email from an unfamiliar address, but the content made me immediately recognize the sender. "Liam, I should be happy to see your book published and successful, but honestly, it feels like another betrayal. You've put our lives, our mistakes, on display for the whole world to see. People are now pointing and whispering in the streets that Amber's coworkers have recognized her, and Noah is facing embarrassment at college. I know it's your story, and you have a right to share it. But remember, it's our story too, our pain. I hope your book brings you the relief you seek, because it brings us nothing but more suffering. Natalie." The email was like a pot of cold water, dousing my joy at the success of the book. I've been so focused on telling my truth and journey that I haven't fully considered the impact that this public sharing might have on Natalie and the kids. I immediately called Amber, but she didn't answer. Noah sends a brief text stating that he needs some time and space. Tyler was the only one willing to take my call. "How bad is it?" I asked directly. "Mom was exaggerating a bit," he admitted, "but some people did recognize us. Some were curious, others judgmental. But we'll get through this." "I'm sorry, Tyler. I didn't write this book to hurt anyone." "I know," he said, his voice more mature than usual. "And to be honest, I think it's a necessary step. We've lived with lies and half-truths and narratives all these years. Maybe it's time to let the truth see the light of day, even if the process is a little painful." I hung up and walked down to the beach, letting the cold water wash over my ankles. I thought back to that night when I found out about Natalie and Jason's betrayal and the feeling of my world falling apart. At that time, my anger led me to seek to cut off and rebuild with no remorse. But now, seeing how my actions affect people who were once part of my family, I can't help but wonder if I've gone too far. Back at the cabin, I found Rachel in the kitchen preparing dinner. Seeing the look on my face, She immediately put down what she was doing. What's wrong? I told her about Natalie's email and the conversation with Tyler, expressing my hesitation and guilt. She listened attentively and then held my hand. Liam, you can't control how people respond to the truth. You have told your story in the most honest and respectful way possible. It's not about revenge. It's about healing. Your healing and possibly the healing of others who have experienced betrayal. But what if it hurts Amber and Noah? Temporary discomfort is not the same as hurt, she said softly. Sometimes the truth takes time to be accepted and digested. Give them some space, and they will adjust. Over the next few weeks, I cut back on media appearances and focused on managing the cafe and supporting a newly formed support group, a safe space for those who have experienced major life changes. I donated all proceeds from the book to organizations that support single parents and betrayed spouses in hopes of repairing the damage that may have been done. A month later, Amber finally returned my call. Her voice sounded tired but calm. I read your book, she said, without any pleasantries, from cover to cover. I held my breath, waiting for her reaction. At first I was angry that you were using our lives as fodder. But after reading it, I realized it's not about revenge or exposure. It's about how you find the strength to move forward. She paused, and, honestly, reading your perspective gave me my first real understanding of the pain you went through. I'm sorry if it bothers you in any way, Amber. There's no need to apologize. Her voice became softer. Maybe that's what we all need. A chance to be honest about the past instead of continuing to pretend it didn't happen. Noah also contacted me 2 weeks later, more briefly, but with the same understanding. Time seems to be softening the initial shock and discomfort, allowing deeper levels of understanding to emerge. Surprisingly, Natalie was the last person to reconnect with me. Her second email was calmer and more reflective than the first. Liam, first of all, I apologize for the previous email. It was an emotional response that stemmed from a sense of shame and exposure. After much thought, as well as reading your entire book, I must admit that you handled this story in more ways than I gave you credit for. You did not demonize me or Jason, although there were good reasons to do so. Instead, you showed the complexity of human nature and how we can all make choices that hurt those we love. What shocked me most was seeing your pain expressed so clearly. In all those years, I never really allowed myself to fully understand the hurt my betrayal caused you. Reading your words forced me to face that, a painful but necessary awakening. If your book has in some way helped others in similar situations, then perhaps all this temporary discomfort is worth it. Thank you for not glossing over the truth, but also for finding a way to tell it that wasn't just out of revenge, Natalie. After reading this email, I felt a long overdue relief, as if the last piece of the puzzle had finally settled into place. Our story is out in the open, the wounds are exposed, but strangely enough, it seems to bring a kind of relief and closure for all. A year after the book was published, I was invited to speak at a major literary festival on the topic of finding a voice in personal trauma. Standing on stage in front of an audience of several hundred people, I shared my journey, not only the experience of betrayal and divorce, but the decision to write and publicize this story. Truth sometimes brings short-lived pain, I concluded, but lies can cause lasting damage. One of the most important lessons I've learned on my journey is that true healing begins with the courage to face the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. After the presentation, a young audience member came up to me and asked, "If you could do it all over again, what would you change?" I thought for a moment and then replied, "I wouldn't change the moment I discovered the truth, because living a lie is never really living. But I might have been more compassionate in the midst of the initial anger and cutoff. I realize now that even in the deepest betrayal, there is a complexity of humanity that deserves understanding, if not forgiveness." Back in town, Rachel and I decided to celebrate. We walked on the beach and enjoyed the sunset. The sea breeze is soft, and the waves caress the sand, as if whispering of the eternal power of time and healing. "You know," Rachel said suddenly, "I've always wanted to ask you a question, but never found the right time. What's the problem? If you could go back to that night, to the moment you first discovered the truth, would you choose not to know? Choose to continue living in that illusion?" I gazed at sea level and pondered the hypothetical question. "No," I finally replied. "Knowing the truth, no matter how painful, is always better than living a lie." That discovery destroyed my world, but it also set me free. It allowed me to rebuild, not only my life, but my understanding of myself. Rachel gripped my hand tightly as we continued to stroll along the shoreline, our footprints leaving fleeting traces in the wet sand that were quickly erased by the waves. Like life's wounds, they may be deep and painful, but over time their power diminishes and becomes part of our story rather than defining all of us. A few weeks later, I received an unexpected package from Amber. Inside, it contains a photo album documenting the last 5 years of the children's lives' graduation ceremonies, vacations, everyday moments. The last page is a new photo of the three kids standing with Rachel and me in front of the beach house. Amber wrote alongside the photo, "Family isn't always defined by blood. Sometimes it is created by choice, love, and forgiveness." I sat on my porch and felt a deep sense of satisfaction as I looked through the album. This journey, from anger to acceptance, from severance to reconnection, has completed a full circle. I found a way to tell my story, not as a victim, but as a survivor, someone rebuilding from brokenness. When Rachel sits down beside me, I turn to her, my heart filled with gratitude. "Thank you," I whispered. "Why are you thanking me?" She asked curiously. "Because you helped me see a wider perspective. Because you believed in me before I was ready to trust again. Because you helped me understand that sometimes the deepest wounds can be the greatest teachers." She leaned on my shoulder, and together we watched the first stars appear in the sky. In this quiet moment, I feel a sense of wholeness and peace, not because the pain of the past is gone, but because it has been integrated as a part of who I am and has become a force that moves me forward rather than drags me down. The waves continue to lap against the shore, a gentle and timeless rhythm that reminds us that life, like the sea, always finds its balance in movement. We may not be able to control the tides, but we can learn to dance with them, to find beauty in brokenness, wisdom in betrayal, and new beginnings in loss. That's my story. A story of being broken and then reassembled, not back to the way it was, but as a new, stronger whole. A story about learning to see possibility in the rubble, about understanding that sometimes the greatest gifts come from the deepest wounds. Regarding understanding, ultimately, we are all the sum total of our experiences and the product of how we choose to respond to those experiences. And of all these lessons, the most valuable may be this one. True strength lies not in never falling, but in rising again after each fall, with more wisdom, greater compassion, and a deeper belief in the good that is still possible. That's the end of today's story. For more captivating tales, hit subscribe and never miss an episode.